The wide Texas sky stretched endlessly, painted gold by the setting sun. Ma, daughter of a proud ranch owner, stood quietly by the old wooden fence, the air still warm from the long day. She clutched her shawl close around her shoulders as if it could shield her from the storm brewing inside her heart. Her eyes drifted toward Luke, the young cowboy who had worked their land for years, silent and steady, yet carrying a strength that spoke louder than any words. Her voice, soft as the breeze, broke the silence. "This is forbidding a broken bar," she whispered, the words trembling like fragile glass in the evening air. Luke's hands, roughened by endless days of labor under the scorching sun, trembled as he held his worn hat against his chest. He lowered his gaze, afraid of what her eyes might reveal, yet unable to step away. Torn between duty and desire, he felt the weight of every unspoken rule pressing on his shoulders. Everyone in town already knew Emma was promised to an ultra, a man of status and wealth, a man her father approved of. But Luke had never been able to silence the pull of her presence, the way her laughter carried across the fields, the way her kindness softened even the harshest days of work. The silence stretched, heavy and dangerous, yet filled with a longing neither could name. Emma's gaze lingered on Luke, searching for something he tried to hide, something that could explain why her heart beat so fast when he was near. The world around them seemed to fade. The cries of the cattle, the rustling of the wind, the fading light of day all became distant compared to the closeness between them. Luke wanted to turn away, to leave before his feelings betrayed him, but his heart refused to obey. It stood stubborn, just like the man himself, rooted in something deeper than fear. Emma drew a quiet breath, trying to steady the storm inside her chest. She had been raised with two lesser rules of family, duty, and loyalty to tradition. Her father had always been clear, her path was not her own to choose. And yet, standing there, the truth felt undeniable. She had never been moved by promises of wealth or by carefully arranged futures. What stirred her soul now was the presence of one man, a cowboy with oil under his nails, sunburned skin, and a heart too honest for lies. It was dangerous, it was wrong, and yet it was the only thing that felt real. Luke finally lifted his eyes, and when their gazes met, time seemed to hold its breath. The young cowboy had never feared long hours or grueling storms, but this moment shook him in ways he didn't understand. His voice was quiet, unsteady, as if even words were a risk too great to take. "I know," he said simply, his tone carrying both surrender and defiance. He knew the line he wasn't supposed to cross, but he also knew that some feelings couldn't be buried forever. His trembling wasn't from weakness, it was from holding back the truth that had grown too heavy to carry. The fading sun painted Emma's hair with strands of fire, her figure glowing against the backdrop of endless land. Luke wanted to memorize her as she stood there, uncertain yet brave, her whisper still echoing in his mind. He wondered if she understood what she meant to him, if she felt the same ache that kept him awake at night. The distance between them was small, just a few steps, yet it felt like miles of rules, traditions, and expectations stood in the way. Still, the pull was undeniable. Every heartbeat urged him closer, while every rule screamed for restraint. Emma's lips parted, as if she might speak again, but the words caught in her throat. She had spent years being strong, living by the choices made for her, never questioning. But here, under the Texas sky, she felt vulnerable in a way she had never known. Her whisper had not been just a warning, it had been a confession of her own fear, her own longing, and the truth she dared not voice out loud. She knew her father would never approve, that the town would judge her harshly, but her heart refused to be silenced. Luke's chest rose and fell with a heavy breath as he tightened his grip on the hat in his hands. "Ma," he began, her name carrying the weight of years of unspoken emotions. It was as though the earth itself listened, waiting to hear what he would say, but no words could fully capture the storm within him. Instead, he took a single step closer, his boots crunching softly on the dry soil. The sound was small, almost fragile, yet in that quiet evening, it felt like the loudest declaration of all. It was a step toward danger, but also toward truth. The night crept closer, the horizon glowing with the last streaks of red before darkness swallowed the land. The world outside their moment still existed. Family expectations, whispered gossip, the weight of promises already made. But right there, under the wide Texas sky, Emma and Luke stood at the edge of something greater than fear. The silence between them was no longer empty, it was alive with every unsaid word, every trembling heartbeat, every fragile hope. And though neither of them moved further, the distance between their hearts had already vanished, leaving behind a love both forbidden and undeniable. That night, under the soft glow of lantern light in the barn, Emma and Luke sat close enough to hear each other's breaths but careful not to touch. The scent of hay and leather filled the air, mingling with the faint smoke of the lantern's flame. Outside, the ranch was quiet, save for the distant howl of coyotes. Inside, time felt suspended. Their voices, low and trembling, carried only truths meant for the safety of shadows. It was a moment that belonged to no one else, yet just a daughter bound by duty and a cowboy bound by silence. Luke's voice shook as he began to speak, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of emotions he had carried for too long. "I've tried, Ma," he said softly, his words breaking like brittle twigs. "I've tried to keep my place, to respect what's expected of me. But every day I see you, and every day it gets harder." His calloused hands rested on his knees, gripping tightly as if holding himself together. Emma listened, her heart trembling at the honesty in his voice, realizing how deeply their silent bond had grown. Emma leaned closer, her courage gathering with every heartbeat. She had always been told to guard her words, to keep her emotions hidden, yet here, in the barn's quiet shelter, she found herself ready to speak. "You think it's easier for me?" she whispered, her tone both fragile and firm. "They've already decided my life, Luke. Every step, every promise, none of it mine. But when I look at you, I feel a broken bar free, and I don't know what to do with that." Her confession was a spark in the darkness, a truth she had long buried. The lantern light flickered, casting shifting shadows across the barn's wooden beams. Luke's eyes softened, though his body trembled under the weight of her words. For years, he had known his place as a worker, a cowboy with no right to reach beyond his station. But Emma's presence tore down those walls with every glance, every stolen word. He had always believed love was for men with wealth, men with names that carried power. Yet, sitting across from her, he realized love didn't ask permission. It arrived uninvited, stubborn and relentless, and it had taken hold of him completely. Emma folded her hands in her lap, her fingers twisting nervously as she tried to steady herself. "If my father knew we were here, if anyone knew, they'd call it shameful. They'd call me foolish." Her voice caught, but she lifted her eyes, meeting his. "But I don't feel foolish, Luke. I feel alive for the first time." The honesty in her tone silenced him, striking deeper than any blade could. He wanted to tell her she wasn't alone, that he felt the same fire burning inside, but words felt too small for what lived between them. Luke shifted, his boots scraping softly against the barn floor. "Ma," he said at last, his voice rough with both fear and longing, "I don't want to ruin your life. You deserve the world, more than I can ever give. But if I leave tonight without saying this, I'll regret it forever. I love you." The words fell heavy, raw, undeniable. His chest rose and fell sharply as he waited, uncertain of what her silence would bring. For the first time, the young cowboy trembled not from restraint, but from the courage it took to bare his heart. Emma's breath caught, her lips parting as tears shimmered in her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like that, and not with expectation, not with calculation, but with pure, unguarded truth. "I love you too," she whispered, the words barely leaving her lips but echoing in his soul. The simplicity of her confession carried more weight than any vow, more depth than any promise arranged by her family. Luke closed his eyes for a moment, letting her words steady him, etching them into his heart as if they were the only truth that mattered in the world. The barn grew still, the quiet around them pressing close as if guarding their secret. Emma leaned closer, the faint brush of her hand almost touching his, though she stopped short, the invisible line of fear still holding her back. They didn't need the closeness of touch to feel the electricity between them. Their hearts were already bound in ways neither dared admit outside those walls. For hours, they spoke of small things and great things, so dreams of freedom, fears of discovery, hopes for futures they couldn't shape. Every word was a thread, weaving a fragile tapestry of forbidden love. As the night stretched on, the lantern dimmed, its glow weakening against the growing weight of dawn. The air cooled, and silence returned between their words. But it was no longer the silence of restraint, it was the silence of knowing. Luke's hands shook slightly, not in fear, but in awe. He had faced storms, wild horses, and endless labor, yet nothing had ever shaken him like Emma's whispered love. For once, trembling didn't mean weakness, it meant his heart had found something worth breaking for. He looked at her as if committing her to memory, as though dawn would take her away. By the time the first pale light of morning touched the horizon, their heavy hearts knew the night had ended. Emma stood slowly, her shawl draped back across her shoulders, her eyes holding his with a final plea. "We can't let them know," she said softly, though every word hurt. Luke rose too, his jaw tight, his hands clenched at his sides. They parted with no kiss, no promise of tomorrow, only the unshakable truth that their love, once awakened, could never be silenced. Outside, the ranch stirred to life again, but within their souls, something eternal had begun.